Hi, folks. We're Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of leadership training. It's referred to as training leaders, training future leaders, preparing future leaders, and all this sort of stuff. And it's targeted very much at majority male-dominated industries such as construction, labouring, and this sort of thing. So wherever there's a clear majority of men working in this particular industry or industry sector or workplace, then this is where the leadership training is supposed to be imposed. Now, it doesn't mean that there isn't leadership training for, bureaucratic dominated industries or female dominated, or I don't know, black lesbian dominated, or whatever. But they're sort of done differently. They're to confirm prejudices in the case of the non-male leadership training, and to encourage street activism, protesting. That's what passes for leadership in the non-male dominated sectors. But in the male dominated sectors, the training, they call it leadership training, but they might as well call it shaming training or guilt transference training or something like that, or anti-white propaganda and so on. So I guess there's a few things here. All the big construction projects around the West, pretty much any Western country you go to, are either some form of public-private ownership, consortiums, or the government is directly. It's a government contract. Taxpayer money is being poured into the pockets of these private companies to build infrastructure or any public works. So now the government, the globalist leftist controlled government looks at this and says, well, this industry is, other than in bureaucrat administration type roles, if you go out onto a work site, this industry is, in terms of frontline workers, is 99% male. And even where there are women there, they're just the ones that hold the stop-go signs, or I don't know, clean out the cabins of the big excavators and trucks. In terms of frontline workers, they're a tiny proportion of it. Again, not even 1% women. Now, it's different in the offices, of course, where the air-conditioned downtown offices, where that's different. If you're a globalist sort of inspired or globalist focused organization of any sort, whether it's a political party or an NGO or anything else, wherever you see a congregation of men, particularly if most of them are white, but wherever you see a congregation of men, it doesn't matter whether it's a workplace or a sporting event or whatever it might be, computer gamers, wherever you see a congregation of men, particularly if they're majority white, then you have to go after it. You're obligated to go. You cannot allow, as you cannot have any white majority country, you cannot have a white majority space of any description, and you have to do something about this. You can't have a white countryside or a white village, or even in an area that where I live, where it's 95% white. There are articles appearing all the time about how that's a problem. 95% white. Oh no, it must be a breeding ground for Nazis. And this is pretty much the attitude, and no less a workplace. So we were involved indirectly in looking at this, indirectly looking at this leadership training stuff that's being used to target particularly straight white men in general, particularly straight white males in the wider construction sector. Now, these are labourers that have to be up on the work site at 6 o'clock in the morning, including tradies and tradesmen of various sorts, foremen, supervisors, truck drivers, excavator operators, whatever you want to. But they're nearly, not all, but nearly all white, and they're all pretty much straight white males. and this just can't be left. It drives the globo-leftists and their foot soldiers, like the femi lesbians, drives them insane knowing that this such a congregation exists. Now, they've tried hard to get women and lesbians and people, anyone that's non-straight white male to turn up on the bitterly cold mornings at 6 o'clock to start work, and they're not having much. If you want to get them to start at 9 o'clock in an air-conditioned office downtown with all the shops and the rest of that's not a problem. But try and get these people out to a work site, it's just not happening. Only straight white males are prepared to do that. And this, of course, drives the lefties insane. So they've introduced what they call leadership courses, which are just propaganda courses that they impose on men to say it's just a whole course of finger-wagging men of how they're bad, they're wayward, they're evil, they have to change their thinking. And you'll notice this as the globalists try and change the world. It's only men who have to change their thinking. It's only heterosexuals have to change their thinking. It's only white people have to change their thinking. No one else has to. Only white people, particularly white men, have to change their behaviour, their attitudes, and their outlook. But no other race of people does. Just the white people, and again, particularly the men. And this really continues in that sort of ideological vein. Now, just look, I managed to see just a couple of days ago a list of these so-called leadership trainers. Now, men are compelled to come to this. So the government is saying, well, we'll give you a contract, to build this bridge or to build this piece of infrastructure, whatever it is. But you have to have leadership training for the men. Well, what is this leadership training? Is it showing them how to be leaders, better managers, better time managers, better organisers, focusing on getting the very best people to do the job, making sure that the team, work crew or something like that, making sure that they have the tools they need to do their job. They're not digging the dirt with their hands because they haven't got shovels, or making sure they got the tools. That's this sort of stuff. No, nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with actual leadership. What does leadership mean when these people talk about it? The ideological fanatics. What does leadership mean? Well, it means, leadership is making sure you've got, affirmative action and DEI in your workplace, making sure you've got a shitload of black lesbians in the key positions. The manager, making sure you've got, straight white males are brazenly and openly discriminated against, making sure that if you're in a room where there's all straight white males, but there's one black lesbian, that the black lesbian is allowed to speak and then tell the evil straight white males how bad they are and how they're making her feel bad because she's a black lesbian. How you go out of your way to insert a minority into an all-white work group just to create the problem, just so you can finger wag the straight white males and so on. This is what they mean by leadership. Now, all the trainers, certainly that I could see, are all women. So they've chosen women only to go into all male workplaces, particularly straight, to finger wag and lecture and morally treat them as if they're a bunch of wayward, naughty children that have to be brought into line. And so talking to some of these women, I don't know, how will these men react to a woman telling them that they're naughty and bad and they have to change their naughty fascist Nazi swastika Hitler ways? How will they respond to that? Well, maybe not so well. So the suggestion came up in a sort of a workshop, work group thing, that maybe telling these men they were straight white males, maybe telling these men they were all a bunch of naughty, bad, wayward children, better change their fucking ways, because this ideological woman with butchy hairstyle was telling them to do that. Maybe that's not such a good idea. Maybe they may be more amenable to different sorts of approaches. No, we have to rub their little Nazi fucking faces in the fucking dirt. Those fucking Hitlers, they have to be taught, they have to be shown that we're in charge now, not them. And so not only do you have an ideologically slanted, heavily slanted, well, it's not a training course, it's an ideological brainwashing course delivered by ideological fanatics. Now, not every woman, I think, was an ideological, is on the training, who was in this work group, by the way. There's one who I thought was, in the overall scheme of things, pretty moderate. but she still comes from that ideological position of we have to get men to change their ways. Men are bad. Men behave badly. Men must change. Well, what about the black lesbians you're putting out? It's like, what about their behavior? No, they're an oppressed minority. They're a protected class. It's the fucking straight white Nazi men that have to change. And even whether it's a radical lesbian or a fairly moderate heterosexual woman, that starting point of the men are bad and they must change their behavior, and we're going to make them change their behavior, up to and including if the lesbian leadership trainer sort of figures, like a school teacher figures that you're not on board with this, then maybe you've got fascist Nazi Hitler, swastika tendencies, then you can be sort of massaged out of a job, that type of thing. So they want to actually have a situation where they effectively, people that maybe aren't in agreement or aren't in sufficiently and full enough agreement, are taken out back and shot. And this also reflects a wider sort of thing. If we look in Britain, for example, teachers can refer 13-year-olds to the terrorist watch list group, and so that 13-year-old, I reckon he might have Nazi tendencies. And that's it. The school teacher has the total moral authority. The radical leftist, the screaming radical leftist ideological fanatic school teacher is given that authority and that power to do that. And of course, that's madness. But these training, so-called leadership training courses very much head down that same path. Now, they do put a little bit of a veneer on it, we're just to help you become a better leader and so on. But they're also meant to spot people who are going to be particularly susceptible to the propaganda and particularly on board with, you know what? I want my whole work crew to be black lesbians. Oh, gee, here's a future leader. This is a leader on steroids. Let's make sure that. So they actually want to make sure that those people are sort of singled out and selected and put into guaranteed positions of managerial authority, so they can further implement the radical leftist ideological agenda. The same as you see sort of in high schools and colleges. Talent, globo-leftist ideological fanatic talent spotters are spotting the people that, okay, let's that black lesbian there, let's make sure she gets into a leadership role. Let's make sure she gets into Congress, or let's make sure she becomes a lecturer or a professor. Let's make sure she becomes a well-known author, and so on and so forth. So people are on board with particularly very simplistic-minded people who are just completely on board with the propaganda. They're to be identified and particularly singled out for special preferential treatments and elevated into senior levels. So this is what all this is about, and it's pretty scary, really. And I think if it is fully implemented as some of the fanatics want it to be, it would effectively be a mechanism through which any straight white male that isn't a simpy little soy boy would find himself, unemployable and debanked and so on and so forth. That's how bad I think it is, where it's going. Now, the intention of some of the moderates in the group, again, the married women who you'd think were moderates, even there, and they may act as a bit of a brake on it, the madness and the fanaticism, but they still come from that point of men are bad, their behavior must be changed. And it's the same with the globalists. White people are bad, their behavior has to be changed. Straight people are bad, their behavior has to be changed. Transphobic people are bad, their behavior has. So you can see how it's determined to break down not only white society, but anything and everything to do with white society. Why, for example, is there no focus on Muslims? Why is there no focus on them and their views on women and women's participation in the workforce and so on? Like you go to a lot of these Arabic countries and everybody in the office is male. There's no women anywhere. The receptionist is a man. Everybody's a man because women don't work in those societies. Why, when people come from as immigrants to the West, why aren't they singled out for special in inverted commas leadership training? But that's it. And I regard this as pretty scary. But you can see the intention to get straight white men are all in a room, are all in a business, are all in a company, are all on a work site. We got to get them. we've got to get those Nazi motherfuckers and push their face in the dirt. And this is very much and it's being required. The government said, well, we'll give you all this money and you'll get rich out of this. We'll give you all this money to go and build this public works infrastructure, but you got to have a fanatical anti-straight white male, so-called training courses going on. That's the deal. You don't do that, you don't get the money. And this is how it's happening. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback Challenge. Thank you for listening.